Ethan Ward had lived on the same wide, open ranch land since he was a child. People said he knew the land better than the lines on his own hands. Every morning, he woke up before sunrise, stepped outside with his hat tilted low, and breathed in the fresh air that carried the smell of grass, warm soil, and the calm quiet of a new day. The ranch was not fancy, but it was full of life. Horses roamed freely in large pastures. Cows grazed peacefully. And the sound of wind passing through wooden fences felt like part of the ranch's heartbeat. Ethan was known for his calm nature and gentle approach. He rarely raised his voice. And even when things got difficult, he stayed steady. But he was also known for something else. His stubbornness. Once Ethan made up his mind about something, almost nothing could change it. People joked that even a running river would turn if Ethan stood in front of it long enough. One warm summer morning, something unusual caught the attention of the ranch workers. A wild Mustang had wandered near the property overnight and somehow gotten itself stuck inside an old enclosure that hadn't been used in years. The workers found the horse pacing nervously inside the small space, kicking up dust with every step. Its mane was messy, its eyes wide, and it kept jerking its head as if unsure whether it should try to escape or stay frozen in place. Maria, who had worked on the ranch for almost 10 years, was the first to notice how unsettled the horse looked. She had a soft spot for animals, and an even softer spot for caution. She never liked rushing into things, especially not when a scared animal was involved. The moment she saw the Mustang's restless movements, she felt a chill run through her body. She walked toward Ethan, who was checking a fence post nearby. "Ethan," she said, her voice low. "I think we need to be careful with this one." Ethan glanced at the Mustang, narrowing his eyes slightly. "Looks scared," he said calmly. "Probably wandered off from the hills and didn't know where it was going." "Scared, yes," Maria replied, "but also unpredictable. You can feel the tension from here." A few ranch hands gathered around the enclosure, whispering to one another. Some suggested calling an expert from town, while others thought it would be better to leave the horse alone until it calmed down. But Ethan stood there quietly watching, studying the Mustang's movements with the patience of someone who had spent his entire life around horses. After a long moment, Ethan turned to the group. "I'll go in and free the rope that's wrapped around its leg," he said simply. Maria's eyes widened. "Ethan, no. Please, don't do that." Her voice carried real concern. "Not alone. The horse is nervous. You know how animals react when they're scared." Ethan nodded slowly, but his eyes stayed fixed on the Mustang. He wasn't ignoring her, he had simply made up his mind already. "It's just tangled," he replied. "I've done this 100 times. Maria stepped closer to him. "This isn't like the others," she insisted gently. "Something about this horse feels different. Look at how it moves. It keeps watching every little thing." Ethan paused for a second, noticing the way the Mustang lifted its head sharply whenever someone shifted their weight or took a breath. It was alert, almost too alert, but instead of backing away, Ethan felt a strange sense of responsibility. This land was his, and the animals that crossed through it, wild or not, always felt like they needed his help. "It's trapped, Maria," he said softly. "We can't just leave it like that." "But you don't need to do it alone," she argued. "At least let someone distract it while you untangle the rope." Ethan shook his head lightly. "Too many people will only make it more nervous. One calm person is better than a crowd." Maria knew Ethan well enough to understand what that meant. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He wasn't being reckless for attention. He simply believed in the quiet bond he had with animals, especially horses. But knowing that didn't make her feel any better. She sighed deeply, her worry sitting heavy in her chest. "Just, please don't do that," she said again, almost in a whisper. "Not like this." Around them, the morning sun grew brighter, spreading light across the ranch. The workers watched with a mix of curiosity and concern. Some thought Ethan's confidence was admirable. Others felt nervous, sensing that this situation was more delicate than it looked. The Mustang continued pacing, stopping every few seconds to tilt its head and observe the people outside the enclosure. Its breathing was fast but uneven, like it was trying to choose between running or trusting the unfamiliar world around it. Ethan set down his hat on a fence post and rolled up his sleeves. His movements were slow, careful, and intentional, almost like he was preparing for a quiet conversation rather than approaching a frightened animal. He picked up a rope, not to use it on the horse, but in case he needed something to guide it gently. Maria stood beside him, still worried. She remembered a time years ago when Ethan tried to help a frightened calf stuck near a ditch. He had ended up slipping and hurting his arm, and for weeks afterward, she reminded him about the importance of caution. Even Ethan admitted that he should have listened to her that day. That memory made her speak again now, this time even more softly. "You don't have to do everything yourself," she said. "Let us help you." Ethan turned to her with a small, reassuring smile. "I know. But this time, I think I need to do it my way." His voice wasn't harsh or stubborn, just steady. And sometimes, that steadiness made people believe in him, even when they weren't sure they should. The ranch workers stepped back, giving Ethan space. The sound of the Mustang's hooves tapping the hard ground filled the air. Dust floated around like tiny sparks, catching the sunlight. The air felt heavier somehow, as if everyone was holding their breath. Ethan took a small step toward the gate of the enclosure. The hinges creaked slightly, and the Mustang's ears flicked forward. For a moment, everything went silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Maria's heart beat a little faster. She opened her mouth to speak again, but no words came out. She knew Ethan had already crossed the line between thinking and doing. Once he reached that point, he never turned back. The Mustang lifted its head, its eyes following Ethan's movements closely. There was fear in those eyes. Yes, but something else too. Maybe confusion. Maybe curiosity. Ethan recognized that look. He had seen it in many animals before. Fear was natural, but it could be softened with patience. Ethan walked slowly, every step gentle and rhythmically calm. He made sure not to make sudden movements. Every few steps, he paused to let the horse adjust to his presence. Behind him, Maria held her hands together tightly, watching every detail. The other workers stayed quiet, as if noise alone could change the outcome. Ethan reached the center of the enclosure. The Mustang stopped pacing and stood still, its ears turning toward him. The two of them, man and horse, faced each other in a moment that felt longer than time itself. And that was where part one ends. Ethan, inside the enclosure. Maria's warning still echoing in the air. And everyone watching, unsure what would happen next. The tension wasn't loud or dramatic, it was quiet, slow, and steady. The kind that makes the heart beat just a little faster because no one can predict the next move. Ethan stood inside the enclosure. And for a moment, everything felt still. The air was warm, but a gentle breeze moved across the ranch, carrying the scent of dry grass and sunlight. The Mustang's eyes were locked on him, wide and alert. Dust floated softly in the light, giving the space a quiet, almost dreamy feeling. But for Ethan, the moment was serious and delicate. He knew that one wrong step could make the Mustang even more nervous. So he kept his breathing steady and slow, hoping the animal would sense his calmness. He had learned long ago that animals could feel the emotions of the people around them. If he stayed calm, the horse might start to calm down too. Outside the enclosure, Maria watched with a worried expression. She couldn't stop thinking about the warning she had given him. She didn't regret saying it. She only regretted that he didn't listen. Ethan meant a lot to her, not just as a coworker but as a friend. She admired his courage, yes, but sometimes courage looked too much like risk. She whispered under her breath, "Please, be careful." The ranch workers stood behind her, all quietly observing. They didn't make noise, didn't move much, and barely even talked. Their eyes were fixed on Ethan, waiting to see what he would do next. Ethan slowly took another step forward. The Mustang lifted its head slightly, watching every move he made. Ethan stopped again, letting the horse adjust. He wanted the Mustang to see him not as a threat, but as someone trying to help. He understood the fear that came from being trapped, even if the creature didn't know him. With gentle eyes, Ethan looked at the rope loosely wrapped around the Mustang's leg. It wasn't tight, but it could still cause the horse distress. He knew he needed to remove it before the Mustang tried to move suddenly and got hurt. But he couldn't rush, not with this animal, not in this moment. He spoke softly, almost in a whisper. "Easy now. I'm not here to scare you." His voice floated through the enclosure, warm and steady. The Mustang flicked its ear toward him, as if listening. Ethan kept talking, not saying anything important, just allowing his voice to fill the space with calm energy. Animals often understood tones better than words. Maria watched him closely. She knew Ethan was good with horses, maybe one of the best she had ever seen. But she also knew that even the best handlers faced moments when things didn't go as expected. She could feel her stomach tighten with worry. Behind her, one of the workers whispered, "He's really doing it." Another replied quietly, "I hope he knows what he's doing." Ethan moved another step closer, barely shifting his weight. Every movement was soft, as if he were walking through water. The Mustang's breathing remained fast, but it didn't pull away. That was a good sign. The horse's tail swayed lightly, not in alarm but in restless confusion. It didn't know whether to trust him or remain cautious. Ethan understood that feeling. Trust didn't appear instantly. It took time, patience, and a kind presence. He reached out one hand slowly, palm open. He didn't try to touch the horse yet. He just let the Mustang see his hand. Horses use their sense of sight and smell to understand people. Ethan wanted the Mustang to understand he meant no harm. The Mustang shifted its weight and let out a soft breath. Its ears twitched forward, then sideways, then forward again, signs of a mind that was curious but unsure. "That's it," Ethan whispered gently. "Just breathe. I'm not going to rush you." Maria felt her own breath catching in her throat. She folded her arms tightly in front of her chest, as if holding herself together. She kept telling herself that Ethan knew what he was doing. But fear doesn't always listen to logic. Ethan took one more step. Now he was close enough to touch the Mustang if he reached out. But he didn't touch it yet. He wanted the horse to make the first move, even if it was something small, a nod, a lean, a step. The Mustang dipped its head a tiny bit. It wasn't much, but it was enough for Ethan to sense a shift in the horse's tension. He let his hand hover gently near the Mustang's neck, waiting for permission from the animal itself. "Good," he whispered. "You're doing good." With incredible slowness, the Mustang leaned forward and sniffed the air near Ethan's hand. Ethan stayed perfectly still, allowing the horse to explore, to understand, to feel no threat. It was a silent exchange of trust. Maria saw this and felt a tiny bit of relief. She exhaled softly, letting some of her tension fade. She still wasn't fully calm. But at least she knew Ethan had reached a point where the horse wasn't resisting him. Ethan gently touched the Mustang's neck with the tips of his fingers. The touch was light, almost floating. The Mustang didn't pull away. Instead, it blinked slowly, a sign of slight relaxation. "That's right," Ethan murmured. "You're okay." Now that he had established a connection, Ethan moved his eyes to the rope. It wasn't tightly wrapped, but it was tangled enough to confuse the horse and make it feel trapped. He had to free it slowly, without making the Mustang feel startled. He lowered his hand slowly from the horse's neck toward its leg. The Mustang lifted its head again, watching him carefully. But it didn't step away. Ethan paused, allowing the horse time to understand what was happening. Outside the fence, the workers leaned forward slightly, their eyes large and focused. No one blinked. The moment carried the kind of quiet tension that comes not from fear, but from uncertainty. They wanted Ethan to succeed, and they didn't want anything to disturb the delicate balance he had created. Ethan gently lifted the loose end of the rope. The Mustang tensed for a moment, its breath catching. But Ethan didn't pull or tug. He simply held the rope lightly, showing the horse that nothing bad was happening. "It's okay," he whispered again, his voice soft like the breeze. The Mustang took a slow breath. Its eyes turned slightly softer, less sharp. Ethan continued to work carefully, easing the rope, inch by inch, away from the leg. His fingers moved carefully, as if handling something very fragile. Maria watched every motion, her heart beating just a bit faster. She remembered all the times she had told him to be careful, and all the times he had smiled at her with reassurance. But this moment felt different, bigger, more intense, more meaningful. She hoped he was right about his decision. Finally, Ethan loosened the last bit of rope. He didn't pull it away quickly. He let it fall gently onto the soft ground, so the Mustang wouldn't feel any sudden movement. The Mustang blinked again, then looked at Ethan. Something in its eyes shifted. It no longer looked as scared. There was still alertness. But now there was something gentler too, an understanding, maybe even a quiet thank you. Ethan stepped back slowly to give the Mustang space. He didn't want it to feel crowded or pressured. He took 2 slow steps backward, and then stopped. Maria let out a deep breath she didn't know she had been holding. The workers relaxed their shoulders, whispering softly. Ethan stayed inside the enclosure a bit longer, letting the Mustang adjust to the new feeling of freedom. He didn't rush out. He wanted the moment to settle, to become peaceful. The Mustang lifted its head, looked around the enclosure, then looked back at Ethan. It was calmer now, standing steady, its breathing more even. Maria whispered, "I can't believe he did it." Another worker replied, "I can. He always finds a way." Inside the enclosure, Ethan finally took one last slow step back and prepared to leave. But he already knew that part 3 of this story would be nothing like anyone expected. Ethan stood quietly inside the enclosure, his hands relaxed by his sides, giving the Mustang all the space it needed. The rope was now lying harmlessly on the ground, and the Mustang's leg was free. But even with the rope gone, the moment didn't feel finished. Something else was happening, something no one fully understood yet. Outside the fence, Maria watched with wide eyes. Her worry was still there, but now curiosity had joined it. She could see a change in the Mustang, a calmness that had slowly replaced its earlier tension. The ranch workers whispered among themselves, trying to guess what the horse would do next. Ethan stayed completely still. He didn't want to rush out of the enclosure. He wanted to leave only when he felt the Mustang was ready. He had learned long ago that sometimes animals needed a moment to process what had happened, just like people did. The Mustang lifted its head and looked around as if realizing there was no longer anything holding it back. It blinked slowly, the way relaxed horses often do. But then something surprising happened, something none of the workers had expected. Instead of running away or turning back to the far corner of the enclosure, the Mustang took a small step toward Ethan. Everyone outside froze. Maria covered her mouth with her hand in surprise. She had expected the Mustang to move toward the open side of the enclosure, not toward the man who had just freed it. The ranch workers leaned forward to see better. Ethan watched the horse's movements carefully, not frightened, only quietly amazed. He didn't reach out to touch the horse. He didn't take a step forward. He simply waited. The Mustang took another gentle step. Its ears were forward, its expression calm, its breathing steady. The horse lowered its head slightly in Ethan's direction. It wasn't a dramatic gesture, it was small, soft, almost shy, but it carried a meaning that went straight to the heart. Ethan whispered, "You're all right." "Good." He kept his voice gentle, almost like a breeze. The Mustang stopped right in front of him, so close he could feel its warm breath. The horse did something even more surprising. It nudged Ethan's shoulder lightly with its nose. Maria gasped quietly. One of the workers whispered, "Did you see that?" Another answered, "I've never seen a wild Mustang do that." It was a moment that felt unreal. The Mustang that had been frightened, restless, and confused only minutes earlier was now showing affection toward a man it had never met before. Ethan stayed still, letting the horse's soft touch speak for itself. He slowly raised his hand and gently placed it on the Mustang's neck. The horse didn't move away. Instead, it leaned into the touch, as if it had been waiting for reassurance. "You're a brave one," Ethan said softly. Outside the enclosure, the workers exchanged looks of amazement. They had worked with horses for years, some their whole lives, and yet none of them had seen a wild Mustang react this calmly to a stranger, especially not after feeling trapped. Maria felt her heart swell with relief. Her fear melted away, replaced with admiration. Watching Ethan and the Mustang together felt like watching trust being built right in front of her eyes. Ethan slowly slid his hand along the Mustang's neck, keeping his movements smooth and gentle. The horse's breathing stayed steady, and it didn't show any signs of fear. Instead, it looked peaceful. The Mustang lifted its head and looked directly into Ethan's eyes. Animals couldn't speak, but their eyes often told stories. The Mustang's eyes held a soft, grateful look, like it understood Ethan had helped it, not harmed it. Ethan smiled, a soft and genuine smile that reached his eyes. He whispered, "You're free now." He stepped back a little to give the Mustang room. He expected the horse to walk away, maybe explore the enclosure, or wait to leave once he stepped out. But the Mustang stayed close. It followed him with slow, gentle steps. Maria couldn't believe it. "It's following him," she whispered. One of the ranch workers nodded. "Like they've known each other forever." The Mustang stopped beside Ethan and lowered its head again. Ethan reached out and touched the horse's side, keeping his hand there for a few seconds. Then he slowly walked toward the gate, expecting the horse to stay behind. But when he reached the gate, the Mustang followed, stopping right next to him. Ethan paused at the gate and looked at the horse. "You want to come out with me?" he said quietly. The Mustang gave a small shake of its head, not a nervous shake, but a friendly one, the kind horses make when they're comfortable. Ethan gently pushed the gate open just enough for himself to step out. The Mustang watched him step through the opening. He didn't want to pressure the horse to follow him outside. He wanted it to choose for itself. For a moment, the Mustang stood still, looking from Ethan to the open gate, and then back at Ethan again. Then, with a calmness no one expected, the Mustang took a step forward and walked out of the enclosure right behind him. Maria almost forgot to breathe. The workers looked amazed, some smiling, some shaking their heads in disbelief. It was a moment they knew they would talk about for years. Ethan didn't reach for a rope or try to guide the horse with his hands. He simply walked forward slowly, and the Mustang walked beside him as naturally as if they had been partners forever. The sun shone on the open pasture ahead, and the Mustang lifted its head to look at the wide space. But it didn't rush into it. Instead, it stayed beside Ethan a little longer, as if waiting for a sign. Ethan turned slightly and said in a calm, warm voice, "Go on now. You're safe." The Mustang hesitated for just a moment, then gently brushed its head against Ethan's arm before stepping forward. With quiet steps, it walked into the open pasture, moving slowly, peacefully, and with complete freedom. The workers watched in awe. The Mustang didn't run wildly or dart away. It simply walked with confidence, looking back at Ethan every few steps, almost as if checking to make sure he was still there. Maria felt tears gather in her eyes, not out of fear or sadness, but because the moment was beautiful. She turned to one of the workers and whispered, "I've never seen anything like that." Ethan leaned on the fence, watching the Mustang explore its new freedom. His face was calm, but inside, he felt a quiet pride. Not the pride that comes from showing off, but the kind that comes from doing something with patience and heart. Maria walked up beside him. "I'm still shocked," she said gently. Ethan gave a small laugh. "Me too, but I'm glad you did it," she said softly. "Even though I told you not to." Ethan turned to her with a warm look. "You were right to warn me. It could have gone differently. But sometimes you just have to trust your gut." Maria smiled. "And sometimes your gut is wiser than most people's thinking." The Mustang, now standing in the sunlight, lifted its head and let the breeze move through its mane. It looked peaceful, content, and safe. The ranch workers slowly walked away, still talking excitedly about what they had just witnessed. Ethan stayed there a bit longer, watching the Mustang adjust to the open space. He knew that this moment would stay with him for the rest of his life. It wasn't just about freeing a horse. It was about connection, trust, and understanding without words, and though no one could have predicted it, the events of this day would become a story told on the ranch for many years to come. The next morning, the ranch felt different. The air was the same warm summer air. The sky was the same wide blue sky, and the land stretched out just as it always had. But the people on the ranch carried something new inside them. An unforgettable memory of what had happened with the wild Mustang. Ethan woke early, as he did every day. He stepped outside with his boots sinking softly into the cool morning soil. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. Birds chirped on the fence posts, and the ranch slowly began to wake up. He walked toward the pasture, where the Mustang had spent the night. He didn't expect anything special. He just wanted to make sure the horse was safe. But as he reached the fence, he noticed something that made him smile. The Mustang was standing near the fence, not far away, not hidden, not restless, just standing calmly, as if waiting for him. Its head lifted the moment Ethan approached, and its ears pointed forward like greeting an old friend. Ethan leaned gently on the fence. "Morning," he whispered with a smile. The Mustang took a step closer. It didn't push against the fence or try anything sudden. It simply came close enough to let Ethan know it remembered him, trusted him, and felt comfortable around him. Ethan reached out carefully and touched the Mustang's forehead. The horse closed its eyes for a moment, enjoying the calm contact. Something warm filled Ethan's heart. He had met many horses in his life, but this bond felt different, quieter, deeper, and unforced. A few minutes later, he heard footsteps behind him. Maria walked up, holding a cup of tea in her hands. She looked tired but peaceful, as if she had been thinking about the Mustang all night. "You're up early," she said softly. "Habit," Ethan replied with a small smile. Maria leaned on the fence beside him. For a moment, they both watched the Mustang quietly. The horse looked relaxed, almost like it belonged there. Maria finally spoke. "I still can't believe how yesterday happened." Ethan nodded. "Me neither. You know," Maria said gently. "I was worried for you. I still am sometimes. You're brave, but sometimes bravery looks a lot like risk." Ethan smiled shyly. "I know, and you were right to warn me." Maria looked at him, her eyes soft. "I know animals trust you, but even then, what you did, it was something special. Not many people would have stayed that calm." Ethan shrugged lightly. "I just did what felt right." Maria sipped her tea, still watching the Mustang. "That horse likes you," she said with a small grin. Ethan chuckled. "Feels that way." "Are you thinking of keeping it?" she asked. Ethan shook his head gently. "It's a wild horse. It deserves freedom. I don't want to take that away." Maria smiled. "Then, maybe freedom is exactly what it's trying to share with you." Their conversation stayed soft and thoughtful. The Mustang stayed close, listening to their voices. It didn't act nervous or distant. It simply existed beside them, peaceful and present. By midday, the workers gathered near the barn, still discussing yesterday's event. Some had theories about why the Mustang behaved so calmly. Others believed Ethan had a special gift with animals. A few said it was luck, but even they couldn't deny the connection they had seen. When Ethan walked by, the workers paused, looking at him with admiration and curiosity. One of them finally asked, "Ethan." Ethan smiled modestly. "I didn't do much. I just stayed calm and patient." "But the horse trusted you," another worker said. "That doesn't happen often." Ethan nodded, still humble. "Sometimes animals just know what's in your heart. Maybe it felt safe. Maybe it felt understood. Maybe it just needed someone gentle." The workers nodded, understanding what he meant. A quiet respect grew in their eyes. Later that afternoon, Ethan, Maria, and a few workers decided to check the fences in the open pasture. The Mustang followed them with slow steps, as if joining their walk. It didn't get too close to anyone except Ethan, but it stayed near enough to show it trusted the group. While walking, Ethan looked around the wide land. The mountains in the distance looked soft under the sunlight. The grass swayed quietly as the wind brushed through. The Mustang stopped occasionally to graze or explore, but each time it raised its head, it looked for Ethan like it wanted to make sure he hadn't walked too far. Maria noticed this and smiled. "It's choosing you," she said. "Or maybe it just likes the company," Ethan replied. They continued walking, checking fences, fixing loose posts, and talking softly about the work ahead. The Mustang followed them the whole time, like a calm shadow. Later in the evening, when the sky turned a deep shade of orange and the air cooled, Ethan stood by the fence again. He watched the Mustang walk around the pasture, exploring the open land. The horse looked free and confident. It wasn't the same frightened creature they had found yesterday. Maria joined him once again. "This horse is going to be talked about for years," she said with a smile. Ethan nodded. "I know, but not because of me. Because of the moment we all shared." "You think so?" Ethan looked at the Mustang, his eyes warm. "That horse taught us something. Patience, trust, calmness. Sometimes things go right when you don't force them." Maria smiled thoughtfully. "That's true." The Mustang walked up to the fence and stood between them. Its gentle eyes looked from Ethan to Maria. Ethan placed his hand on its neck, and Maria softly touched its shoulder. The moment felt peaceful, like the ranch itself was breathing calmly. Ethan took a slow breath. "You know, when you told me please don't do that, you weren't wrong." Maria raised her eyebrows. "Really?" Ethan nodded. "You were looking out for me. And I appreciate that. I really do." Maria smiled warmly. "You still did it anyway. And if I had listened to you," Ethan replied gently, "maybe the horse would still be trapped. But you weren't wrong to say it." Maria looked at him with soft eyes. "I'm just glad it turned out this way." They both fell silent as the Mustang nudged Ethan's arm again. The sun lowered behind the hills, turning the ranch golden. The day felt peaceful, full of quiet understanding. As the evening slowly turned into night, the Mustang walked across the pasture, stopping on a gentle rise. Its silhouette stood against the fading sky, calm and beautiful. The ranch workers gathered on the porch, talking softly, still amazed by how everything had unfolded. Ethan and Maria stood together, watching the horse. They didn't need to speak. They both knew the day had changed something deep inside them. The ranch would remember this event for years. People would tell the story of the wild Mustang that trusted the rancher, who listened more with his heart than his head. They would talk about how a simple act of calmness turned into a moment of connection that touched everyone who saw it. And even though Ethan had ignored Maria's warning, the story would always begin with her words. "Please, don't do that." But the ending would always remind everyone why the rancher did it anyway. Because sometimes, trust grows in the quiet moments when fear is replaced by understanding.